Professor Sarah Rubidge, Research Consultant for Rambert School of Contemporary Dance. I would like to welcome you to the first of Rambert's Dance Dialogues. Dance Dialogues is the inaugural event of Rambert School Research. I've been working with the school on the development of a lively research culture for some time now, focusing on the practice of dance, a culture which can take its place in the UK's dance research environment. We took our first steps with a postgraduate programme. First, an MA for young professional dancers in the elite sector, a collaboration with Rambert Company, and we consolidated the programme with a new MA in dance research for mature professionals. At the same time, Rambert staff have been involved in a number of research projects. The most recent is a practice-led collaborative dance project with the dance department of Queensland University of Technology in Australia. So we're going international. However, and this is important, we firmly believe that reflections on practice, wherever they take place, can be considered a research activity, and that dance researchers need not be confined to academia. Tonight's event will demonstrate that dancers, whose voice tends to be underrepresented in dance research, can be counted in that number of dance researchers. Dancers in Conversation offers you an opportunity to listen in to an open-ended discussion between 7 professional dancers. 3 are former dancers, 4 are practicing professionals. The 3 former dancers are Amanda Britton, now principal of the Rambert School, Paul Liburd, teacher par excellence, whose specialism is in the restaging of the contemporary canon, Professor Susan Jones of the University of Oxford, who was herself a professional dancer with Scottish Ballet, and the 4 practicing dancers, Simone Damberg-Wirtz, Liam Francis, Hannah Rudd, and Jacob Y. I thank them all for agreeing to participate in this event, and will now ask Susan to guide the flow of the conversation, whilst remembering at the same time to become an active participant in it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's great. And may I say thank you to everybody for asking me along today, because it's my great pleasure to be once more in a room, albeit virtual room, full of dancers or ex-dancers or participating in a conversation about what it means to be a thinking dancer. I'd like to get you each to introduce yourselves. Tell us something about your experiences, what your background is, where you've worked. And let's begin with you, Amanda.
Hi, so I'm Amanda Britton. As Sarah said, I'm the Principal and Artistic Director of Rambert School. I often joke that if you cut me through the middle, it says Rambert in the cross-section. I trained with a former Rambert dancer from the age of 12. I then went to Rambert School from 16 to 18. I was lucky enough to get into Rambert Company when I was 18 years old. I spent nearly 10 years in the company working with Christopher Bruce, Glenn Tetley, Merce Cunningham, Trisha Brown, and a number of other choreographers. So that's sort of 1980s time. I then had a teaching career, completed an MA myself at the place in dance education and training. And then I returned to my alma mater, to Rambert School, where I set up the degree programme. I became deputy principal and then principal. So I'm directing the school where I trained, which is an immense privilege.
That's great. Thank you very much. Who'd like to go next? Paul, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, hello, I'm Paul Liburd, former dancer. I've had quite a long career, 24 years, 25 years. I started dancing in Leeds at the age of 9 with Nadine Senior, who was the founding director of the dance school in Leeds. I moved to London at 16, trained at the place with teachers like Jane Dudley, Robert Cohan, Brenda Last, a wonderful set of teachers. I went to work with that company there for 5 years. Then I moved to Rambert for 12 years, working with people like Killian, working with Matt Zeck, working with Christopher Bruce, across array of people again. And then towards the latter part of my career, I went to Scottish Ballet, where I did more classical work, dancing Balanchine, Forsyth, a lot of works again. I stopped dancing in 2011. I retrained as a teacher. I'm now a teacher with Amanda at Rambert School, teaching contemporary dance and restaging works. And I'm also a teacher at London Studio Centre, who I had the wonderful of working with Liam when I was there as well.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear from you, Paul. I was just so delighted the other day to hear that you remember 261
Yes.
West Princes Street in Glasgow. You know, so we share something very
Yes, dear.
specific there. That's very nice. Simone, how about yourself?
Hi, yeah, so I've been a professional dancer for half of my life now. I studied at Royal Danish Ballet School in Denmark from age 8. And then when I was 16, I joined the Peter Schaffers Ballet in Denmark. And then I moved on from there to Theater Ulm in Germany, where I was for 4 years. And then now my last 7 years as a professional dancer, I've been with Rambert Company and got to work with brilliant choreographers there through different directors as well. So yeah, that is me, just a dancer and interested in choreography.
Just you. I mean, that sounds pretty amazing to me. Liam, how about yourself? Tell us about you.
I started dancing when I was 14 with Zoo Nation Dance Company, which is a hip-hop theatre company. I then went on to work with the company. I worked as a commercial dancer up until the age of 21. I trained at London Studio Centre from 18 to 21, and then I joined Rambert as an apprentice dancer, and I've been there for 6.5 years, I think, something like that. Not as long as Paul or Amanda, but maybe I'm on my way. Who knows?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. No, it's a very interesting career path there you've had. And Hannah, how about, I keep saying how about, well, how about Hannah?
Yeah, so I started training, I guess, more professionally rather than just like a hobby. When I was 11, I went to the Royal Ballet School and I trained there for 7 years. And then quite quickly, I got into contemporary dance. I worked for the Michael Clark Company for about 2.5 to 3 years in the beginning of my career, as well as doing some other kind of freelance projects. And then I also remember 261 as well, because I went to Scottish Ballet after that.
Oh, of course you did, yeah.
After Scottish, I mean, it was kind of spread out over a few years. I also did some other freelance projects and things. I came to Rambert in 2011, and I have been there since, quite a long time. Yeah, and just been enjoying having somewhere to try and evolve from and learn from, and yeah, it's offered me that kind of stability to establish myself, which was what I had wanted. So that's me.
Well, that's very interesting. We're already getting lots of questions coming up here about your various backgrounds. Jacob.
So my background, I started dancing when I was 8. I was picked up by a project called Chance to Dance, which is a program by the Royal Ballet, which goes into areas of London to pick out kids who might not usually get the chance or the exposure to ballet. And so I stuck with them with classes once or twice a week, went to JAs, eventually to White Lodge, then to Central School of Ballet, where I graduated in 2012 and was employed at Ballet Black for 5 years, where I did like neoclassical, classical and contemporary works, and then made the move over to Rambert, and I've been there since.
Right. So I guess the joining, the unifying subject here is Rambert, of course. But I thought this is such an interesting group of people, and you've had so many varied experiences. I'm just wondering if there are any commonalities in our experiences. And I mean, I was thinking, for example, that one of the phrases that used to come up in class all the time was things like, I'm going back a while now, but somebody would stand at the front of the room and say, "Don't think, just do it." And I always remember thinking, what does that mean? Don't think, just do it. Are these mutually exclusive activities? Do you see what I mean? And in some ways it's quite an odd phrase, because it's deprecating to both thinking people who think a lot, people who are practicing thinkers, philosophers, and so on, and to dancers, as if we are either minds or bodies. And that's a very common problem, I think, that we come across. But I wonder if you have any sort of similar experiences of that nature that made you feel that you wanted to be taken seriously as a thinker as much as a dancer, or the fact that in fact you are an embodied thinker, that you think with your bodies in many ways.
I was actually thinking as you were saying it, something, there's real validation in both. I think sometimes both, I think a lot, like through always, but like in my dancing as well. And when I learn or when I process, I'm very like cerebral. I have to understand it here before I translate it. Of course, that's science as well. Of course, I understand that. But sometimes I can find that blocks me as well, actually. And I think there's real relevance in actually sometimes just doing. Sometimes, you can kind of stop the flow of information. You can stop the flow of creativity, of artistry, when your mind stops you, which I feel I experience often. And, actually through working with like other choreographers and things, different works, sometimes it's more beneficial just to do, like not think too much, watch and do, and allow like kind of like you to absorb the information rather than having to kind of type it all in somehow, which I tend to do, as that can be restrictive. I mean, that's kind of what came up for me with what you were saying. I mean, with regards to what people said at the front of the room, I don't remember a particular phrase.
During the choreographic workshops that we've done at Rambert, and we had this amazing associate who came in called Peggy, who has worked with us, and she's really wonderful in actually making you think. So, but in a really beneficial, integrated way, and not separating the thinking from the doing, and encouraging those who are asking questions to ask more questions. So there's this really wonderful energy she has about meeting you where you are. So if she can tell that you're thinking about something, she will guide you in how to think for that moment in which you're thinking, and make you ask yourself questions, which is a really wonderful way for people who think about dancing to integrate the thinking in their dancing.
Yeah, so you're actually thinking about reflection as something slightly different to thinking. I mean, I think why I said at the beginning that I think there was a problem with the language of that phrase is that, in fact, I think what that person was trying to get across to us is that you need to lose that sense of self-consciousness to truly immerse yourself in the flow of the movement or whatever to some degree. But it doesn't mean necessarily that you stop reflecting on your practice or on what you're doing.
I mean, I had a moment actually today of overthinking, and I guess maybe now what I would say that I'm in my head, but I'm kind of also like, I need to like program myself to find the flow, to then enjoy it, then to let go, to then perform it freely. And those moments sometimes, I don't know if anybody else have experienced that, like you are dancing on a stage, it might be a performance, and you're feeling super great, and suddenly the brain starts to think. It's like it pulls you out, and it's like
Interesting.
I guess like this break of flow, because Hannah mentioned like the flow or when she was talking as well. And we are all different, but definitely also the reflection, because I was thinking that today. I was like, stop thinking, just do it, like just feel it and go.
For us to be taken by, or like, because I feel like sometimes like it kind of like knocks you off guard, you start thinking. Makes me realize that perhaps we do need to think when we're dancing, but it's like how we're thinking or what we're thinking about, rather than going into it with like no thought. Perhaps there needs to be like a considered conscious thought, so we're actively continually thinking, so we're not taken off guard when we have a thought that kind of
Interesting.
It's not so much, I feel like, self-consciousness, because I think that can limit you in the moment, but to be conscious of your environment and to what you're performing. I remember at our most recent Sadler's, one of the staff asked me right before I went on, I had to go on for like a different role, which I obviously practiced, but not as rehearsed in really. And they asked me, are you nervous? Like, how do you feel? I was like, I'm about to go on stage and they're asking me if I'm nervous. I was like, I told them, I was like, it's too late for that. I was like, it's too late. I was like, it's way too late for that. It's too late for me to be thinking about this. Like, I'm going on, and that's it.
There's also that thing of like, what is the thinking? Like we're talking about reflection, but also, is it actually a feeling? Jacob's like, it's too late. The question, it is too late. I'm gonna go on and I'll do it. And I'm sure for Jacob as well, you wanted to do it in a way that you enjoyed it. So I'm assuming like you entered into the role, into the space, hopefully with maybe nerves, which is good. It means we care, as people say, but that feeling of like just wanting to enjoy it as well. And but I think there's a lot of emotion involved, and we can feel different things from different movements as well.
I feel that as dancers, we're so used to like training our muscles, but actually like our thoughts, like we also have to train those as well, you know, like we absolutely have to train those, because and maybe that's also this thing, what you were saying, Liam, about, you know, like having like a conscious kind of like a conscious thread happening, so you're not pulled one way or the other, you know. And it's like something that that's just as important. And it's, you know, it's like affirmations, or, you know, just to be as simple as that. Of course, in our head, in our thoughts, is all of our life experience. The whole lot is there the whole time, you know. And we have to really, like, we have to have guards on that. We absolutely have to have guards on that, because they're there, like they're ready for you. The moment that you lose consciousness, it's easy for them to slip in, and you want the right ones to slip in those moments. So like, as much as we train our body, we have to train our brain to be there to support us in that moment as well, you know.
It's great to hear this generation of dancers talking about flow and about that kind of awareness. And it's just so key. I mean, it's such an important part of being a dancer at this level. The sports psychology, you know, that work that's been developed for years and years. Obviously, sportsmen, men and women, are absolutely you know, trained to train their minds to think, to get into that state. And there are particular ways that, you know, strategies you can use to get yourself into the state of flow, which I think, you know, dancers are learning that now, but still learning on the job in a way. And I'm really passionate actually about this kind of area, and we put quite a lot in place for our young dancers, our students now, in terms of dance psychology, because I just think it's absolutely as important as the physical work. You know, to be able to get yourself to that level, you have to learn how to discipline your mind, to be able to control your anxieties and get yourself into that absolute sort of optimal state to perform at your best.
Paul, what do you feel about this question of, you know, thinking and doing in relation to reconstructing? Because you do a lot of reconstructing and teaching.
Yeah. Now I'm just thinking about when I was back dancing, performing.
Yeah.
I was just like these guys, and I would say in the studio rehearsing. I think that's the reason why with the directors that I worked with, they rehearse so much, because then it becomes embodied in you. It becomes second nature in you. So then when you go on stage, you can almost get lost in the moment.
I wonder if we could think a little bit about other kinds of thinking. I mean, do you think that there are any other forms of thinking or forms of discipline, like just the discipline of writing, or about learning about the history of your tradition, that kind of thing? Does that affect in any way the way you actually dance, your practice?
It depends on the work, how far back it's been restaged from.
I've been very lucky, like at Rambert, working with some amazing choreographers who actually feel like they're choreographing your mental journey through a work as well as your physical journey. Has been a real blessing, is when you're working with someone who's actually giving you information about where you mentally are in this moment. I think that shifts between what sort of work you're doing, perhaps. Yeah. And I kind of, I'm thinking of some of the more theatrical works that we've done that are also slightly abstract, but have a thread of some sort to them. And I think that's something that really helps me, is that actually then the thinking isn't ultimately down to me as well. It's not I'm deciding what I'm thinking. Actually, the choreographer is kind of instilling unity amongst us all, not only in physicality, but also in our kind of mind states where we are. So there's like a channel between us, which also I then find as performers, you feel more free to find your individuality in your movement, with each other mentally, knowing kind of what you're aiming for here. And then perhaps you are able to be more of an individual, and you're not trying to recreate a shape, but there's a sensation which requires you to be mentally engaged as well.
when you were asking about a different way of thinking, recently with another choreographer we were working with, it completely changed for me, because the piece or the dance is the choreographer's personal language, but it wasn't about performing it. It was like William was saying, it was about my journey through it, my experience as a dancer. It wasn't for the audience.
Wow.
I'd never experienced until that piece that a choreographer comes in, and it was with love as well, and like really wanting you to experience this. You're not like it, that would be the performance, like going through it, and maybe it was just of how it was delivered to me to do it. But like another different way of thinking was Amanda Britton came and said a piece a couple of years ago, and she was an original in the 4 Elements Listen to Child. And the steps are simple, but the way they are put together, in my life, have I never ever before or after have to concentrate, like really stay focused 100% the entire time. So there's like 2 different things, because they both give me different things that I can go and learn from and reflect on. There's not that I love one more than the other, but it was 2 very different moments.
We recreated a piece from, I think it was the late 1980s, and Lucinda Childs, who had created the piece, actually returned to recreate it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and there was no, I've recreated other works before and restaged works for students, of course, but with this work, there was no sense that she wanted to develop or change the work, that we really, really went right back to the original intention and created it absolutely sort of verbatim, as it were, from the video. And it is an incredibly challenging work. As Simone said, it's really simple. It's just repeated steps in different patterns, but each section is incredibly long, and it's really hard to stay focused and very easy to get lost in what section you're in. So it was really challenging, actually, and it was a pleasure to work on it again. I'd forgotten how hard it was.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because Paul, we had a little exchange about the issue of recreation and reconstruction, because you do so much this. And I'm thinking in relation to what Amanda was just saying, you said that what you're doing is trying to recover the authorial intention or the choreographic intention. And then we talked a little bit about to what degree is this possible, to be, or is it always a new moment in time?
I think, as like I said to you, I think it always will be new, because dancers are new now, so it's different bodies, different technicalities, different experiences. So naturally, always when you recreate it, it will be new.
Yeah. So as Jacob said,
you can have the essence there, you can have the essence under there, but naturally, always will be a new experience for the audience viewing and also for the dance performing.
Just going back to the 4 Elements experience, I suddenly sort of thought, I wonder if this generation of dancers sort of understand Child's work, and the sort of context she was working in at that point. And I think we actually did a little discussion or seminar, didn't we, Simone, at one point, just to try and set it, in that context, in the New York, postmodern period, in the kind of other work going on, so that, because otherwise you're just learning the steps, and the steps are tricky and complex and not particularly, they're hard. And not in a creative process. So I just felt like it would be useful for the dancers to sort of understand that. And I think, I hope it was useful for them to sort of see where it's sat in history, if you like.
That was it useful? I mean, you can't say no, can you?
No.
So I was just going to say, I think that would be incredibly useful. Looking back on my own experiences as a dancer, if I think about, we did a mixture of classical and contemporary pieces, and I'm just thinking how different it would have been to have done, Swan Lake or something, and to have actually understood where it came from, to think about Tchaikovsky's, problems with homosexuality, and, what's driving the emotion behind this Petipa choreography, instead of just being a medium of that choreographer. well, I mean, I guess we are to some degrees always a medium. But I think that's one of the things that I wonder whether it must have given you a much greater sense of critical distance from what you were doing, as well as immersing yourself in it. Simone, did that help?
For me personally, as a dancer, I like to have the background story and have something I can delve into, an understanding of what it is I'm doing. And I remember also watching videos of other works from Lucinda Childs, and she was crazy. Growing up in a more classical background, and then seeing it more like, I think it was one with sponges, like performing arts, and she had them like on her face and all of this stuff. And I think it's just like it really, it all helps to understand who you're working with. And I guess that's the difference as well between just steps, like constructing, like that, you know, you can research the people you're working with, other works, find out, because I also guess like as we evolve and grow as dancers, and the more we stretch this muscle that is our brains, the same happens with the choreographers as well. They will also evolve. I think I'm talking around the question now, but it was helpful.
No. I think that all adds to that sense of what it is that would help us to improve our practice in some ways. But I wondered if we could move on to thinking about what kind of things that you personally like to bring to your practice, like from another art form, from another, you know, cultural sort of phenomenon. I mean, is there anything specific that you would bring? I mean, it might be Buddhist meditation, it could be art history or something like that. Is there anything that strikes you as particularly important to bring from the outside into the rehearsal room?
Other dance styles. I remember joining Rambert and joining in a really big company with a bit of a legacy and an institution. I felt that the other dance codes that I have maybe weren't welcome there, and that I had to adhere to the majority. Really? Yeah, so whether like the majority of the kind of like the majority of the training was quite heavily rooted in ballet in the company when I joined, and I felt very much like the skills that I had out that weren't that. I felt really like shy, embarrassed to bring them into the space, and were often felt as if they weren't of the same value of the other skill sets that were being exhibited in the room. So I think that's one thing that I'm now a lot more confident to do, is to say, these are the skills that I have learned. They are completely transferable. This is contemporary dance. Like, we can do whatever we want. If we're allowed to put sponges on our faces in a piece, then yes, I'm allowed to, do you know what I mean? Do all these other things that are to do with my body. They're skills that I have, their coordinations, their rhythms, their all these sorts of things. That was the first thing that popped into my head.
I mean, I always feel that the one thing I'm most grateful for is I'm so disciplined, you know, and I don't think that necessarily just comes from learning how to do ballet at all. But I feel like the discipline or, you know, dedication that I was kind of drilled into me, and there are negative effects of that, of course. But it's like I try to then, again, like Liam was saying about transferable skills, it's like I transfer that discipline to learn other things. You know, there was so much that I had to learn when I came to Rambert, and it's so interesting to hear Liam say what he said, because actually, you know, really, like what do we do actually now that really requires a ballet technique, really? Like nothing actually. So like I had to not unlearn things, but I had to really like shake it up like drastically, and it took a long time, like the transition between, I remember like a couple of years ago, another young guy joined the company, and he had this time where he was like, I just can't do anything now. He was like, I thought he also came from Scottish ballet actually, and he was like, I was all right at ballet and I wanted to do contemporary, and I can't do anything right now. And I was like, I get it, I understand, because I feel like I went through that same transition of like, wait, I thought I had at least one skill, and now I feel I have no skills.
Yes.
And then kind of like piece yourself back together again, but like more full, more whole of like things that you're learning, and you have to like, just really like hold on tight, like as go through that transition of like, oh God, everything's falling apart. Because like you really need that thing to fall apart. And like, right, even now, 14 years on, there is so much that I have to learn. There is so much that I need to work on. It's just always the way. And like, there is always more that you can add, and always more that you need to let go of, you know? So yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fascinating because what you're talking about reminds me of how I felt going to study and having to learn how to write. I mean, it was really a similar experience of being totally thrown off balance, you know, and I thought, I can't do this. I'm not comfortable. And, you know, not that I ever felt comfortable particularly in the dance studio, but it's a different kind of discomfort. And then what you mentioned, this idea of transferable skills, which I think is so important for all of us, particularly as dancers, you know, to give ourselves the confidence to do other things. And you guys have already had that because you've moved between, you know, ballet, contemporary, hip hop, all kinds of things. How did you feel about that, Simone?
I think I joined Rambert at a time. I wanted to do more contemporary works because I felt for me as a person, it was more honest than ballet, where ballet was more technique and you were stereotyped more. So to my personality and who I am, contemporary was more what I wanted at the time. But Rambert was kind of like in a place where it was more neoclassical work they were doing. So I had a more smooth transition into more contemporary, more grounded work. But I had to learn Cunningham when I joined the company. I'm still learning it. It's something that I think you continue to explore. And we, like when we were talking about flow earlier, Liam and I before has talked about this, like that I think Liam gets a lot of flow in Cunningham and he can lose himself in it. I'm not at that point at all yet. But what I love about it is that it's such a, you know, I feel again, actually, it's about, you're trying to do the impossible. So it's about the journey and the experience of doing that rather than, again, a performance. But I remember like one of my colleagues at the time were like, oh, Cunningham is just like ballet. And I was like, it is not. So yeah, I had to, like Hannah said, lose the ballet. Like I felt like yeah, I didn't know anything anymore.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, Hannah.
Really, really small, sorry, because I know I just said a load of stuff. Like this, just reflecting on what Simone said about how, like, with Cunningham, it's like the aim is to get it, not actually, the aim is always to try and obtain it, not to actually obtain it. Does that make sense? And I feel like I learned that from working with Michael Clark before, because like his work was like, just not, like, absolutely not. There was one piece that we did, which was called Submission, and I had a jacket on my legs and like trousers on my top. It's just madness, and I was struggling so much. And I was 19. I was so young, so I was still very much in that kind of like, you know, ballet training. And like my colleagues that I was working with were like, it's not about obtain, like it's not about actually getting it. You just have to like go for it. And I think that's what I experienced also then, like watching my colleagues Rambert do Cunningham. It's like it works when there is this flow, and was expressing, you know, that she was talking to Liam about, like there is this flow of like trying to obtain this thing, which makes it dance and not just something that perhaps could look quite architectural, you know.
I definitely think there's a search for like self kind of truth within movement, like a search for individuality. I feel like which aren't being like competed with. I feel like that's what a lot of like choreographers today look for, as opposed to like whether it be like form or a specific technique. It's like an originality. And also is what was so interesting about what Liam said was that if anything, I feel like maybe it's just the shift of trend that's been from my training and what we were taught. Like we were taught like, oh, you have to learn this. And then it turns out that, oh wait, no, actually they want me to do like a backflip and like a 2-2 step. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like kind of like the opposite of what we believed it to be or how we were trained to believe.
Talking about what Jacob says, like it's actually the same thing. It's like we both believed entering that space that this is how it has to be. and both coming from very different experiences, have entered the space and gone, no, this isn't how it was. Yeah, no, there's different things that are needed here, rather than the things that we were either taught or we assumed were like the golden keys to this, opening all these doors. There are other things. There are our things, our experiences.
Well, that's, yeah,
on the same realization.
That is interesting, because it brings me to the idea of, it's both, you know, your things that are coming into your new practices, but there's also at the same time a sense of learning critical distance from your own things in order to allow yourself to immerse yourself in a new thing. Does that come across at all? I was thinking, how do you begin to teach away McGregor work, for example? I mean, how do you get dancers to immerse themselves in a new style?
For me, I haven't taught Wayne's work. As I say, most works that I teach are works that I've done myself. And the reason why I say I do that is because I have a knowledge myself.
Right.
I have a knowledge myself of experiencing it myself, performing it myself. That's the reason why I choose works that prominently that I've done myself. Wayne's work I haven't done. As I say, I've done Chris Brooks, Dan Wagner, various things over the years, Ashley Page. But these kind of choreographers, I've worked with these guys quite a lot, danced a lot of their works. I understand their vocabulary. I understand the essence that they try to that they put out there.
So you've embodied their vocabulary already.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm wondering if we could move a little bit to sort of round off the discussion to your sense of where your own identities are developing in thinking about all these questions that we've had tonight, which are really about how you engage in thinking about your bodies and how you engage with the embodied knowledge that you're creating constantly, day after day. How do you feel you might go forward with this material? I mean, all of you have been incredible in describing the ways in which you go about your practice. I'm wondering what you think of as the next step. Or don't you? Liam, what's the next step for you? I mean, you've done some choreography and...
Yeah, I think the next step continues to shift. Like, I don't have like a goal, like for what the next step is. I feel there was like a point when I, like, after having been in Rambert for like 3 years, where I felt very much like, I felt extremely of service to the company and not to myself. And that's when I started creating works that kind of helped fulfill my purpose. And I wrote an article and I created work and I explored all these other avenues as a means of making sure that I'm in service to myself as well as the company. So I'm able to do my job in the company as well as possible, because I'm also making sure that I'm topped up in regards to what my purposes are and what my ambitions and dreams are. And some of those are definitely fulfilled through the company. But for me, it proved by itself that following the direction of the company wasn't fully fulfilling me, the direction that I wanted to go.
Right, okay.
There are other things that come into mind, like research, choreographing, writing, just making other stuff that fulfills me.
Yes. Yeah. What about you, Simone?
Well, my next step is, I mean, we've had these great discussion groups during a lockdown, which has been really helpful for me to also talk about things and not dance, because yes, I'm a dancer, but I see myself more as an artist. And I think as art, like, I guess it's like that kind of maybe cheesy thing, like we say, oh, dance is a lifestyle. But I think like if you're an artist, like everything you do, and like we talked about earlier, like I think it was Jacob you were saying, no, like you bring you know, you bring yourself, and Hannah was saying this as well, it's all your experiences is in your entire life. So I think for me, the next step is just to, like, you know, seek out the people that I know might think differently or think in a way, or have, like, yeah, just, it's a continuously growing and getting information and educating. I think for me is like the next step, because if I think as a person in your personal life, as an artist, as a dancer, it's all beneficial.
Yeah, that seems to be absolutely on the money there. You know, education is bringing out, isn't it? It's finding what's within and bringing out. Hannah and Jacob, you're yeah, okay, I can just see you there, Jacob. Hannah, what do you feel are the next steps for you? Hannah's frozen. Okay, Jacob.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot to be said for trust, like self-trust, trust in your, like, in your decision, like whether it be artistic or like external. I think that we often know what is best for ourselves, and whether it be like the next step in our journeys, like whatever, as in any field, and especially in dance, like, you know, if you really listen to yourself, you know what you want to move, like how you want to move next, you know what, like, kind of what you want to evoke. And it's really like listening to this inner voice and staying strong with it, staying self-confident to it, because I think there's a lot of, obviously, like hesitation, and when it comes to like overthinking things, I think this is just basically a symptom of just doubt and uncertainty. So to try and, like, to quiet that voice and listen to your intuition is, I think, I guess, super
Yes, I think you all seem to be talking about this idea of somehow blending individuality with the communal activity of dance, and that if you neglect one or the other, you get out of balance. I wonder what your next step is, Paul, or are you just happy on your own step right now? I think Paul is not hearing us.
No, I'm freezing. Can you say that again, please?
Yes, I wonder what your next step is, Paul. Or are you happy where you are right now?
No, I'm happy where I am, but I'm just thinking to myself, it's just trying to make what I do in my practice in the studio, the kind of works I bring to students now, that they're still relevant, because dance has shifted. I've been out from the stage the last 10 years. So it's just finding works that are relevant, that the students are going to still thrive from. And I think there's still always something to learn from in the past, but I just hope they can learn something from, or take something from that, put it that way.
Take something from the past.
Take something from the works that I'm bringing to them from the past.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to me a very important role that you have there in transmitting work, you know.
No, I do. I look at Liam and all these guys, and it's dance. I look at the online. I look in the theatres. Dance has moved on so much.
Oh, I know. It's
in 10 years. It's shifted quite a lot.
Yeah.
So it's just what is relevant. That's what I keep on asking myself.
Yeah. So what is relevant? You know, there's another question we could ask another day. You know, is it valid to go back to the past, or what do we mean by being relevant? You know.
You know, I'm at a stage in my career now where I'm able to nurture younger dancers, and that's such, as I said at the beginning, it's a real privilege. But not only that, you know, think about their education in the holistic sense, if you like.
Yeah,
not just the dance, and I think that's an amazing privilege. But I also think quite a lot about staff at the school, and about, you know, offering opportunities to everybody as much as I can, and I see that as part of my role. And something I think about quite a lot is that, you know, as a dancer, there's you know, you hear these this generation of dancers speaking, and they're so immersed in the work and so passionate and so knowledgeable, and, you know, really at the elite end of the profession. And that's amazing, but you have little time to think about anything else when you're doing that. You're so immersed in what you're doing. And I think if I'd known at the time, you know, what maybe the things that I was good at, apart from just being a dance, not just being a dancer, but apart from that, if I'd had a chance to sort of recognize other skills, I think I would have found that useful. So I'm thinking quite a lot about mentoring, dancers, perhaps as they, you know, move on from their dance careers into other careers, and how that could be interesting and important. I think there's an assumption that as a dancer, you're a creative person. I'm not a creative at all. I was a dancer, but I don't consider myself a creative. I was a dreadful choreographer, not a bad teacher, but actually, you know, I found other skills later in my career. So I think, you know, that idea of transferable skills is really interesting and important.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. It's lovely to hear that. I feel very much empathy with your position there. And I'm hearing from everybody very much the same kind of questions I get in my own students, you know, where they're learning English. And there's this sort of tension between submitting to a new discipline or a new style or whatever, and retaining one's sense of individuality, you know, and it's almost, it's just so exciting to go on and encourage people in that way, I think. And I think we should wrap up now, because this seems like a good point. We've come back to Amanda. And does anyone else have anything to finish off with? Would you like to add to this? Otherwise, we'll go back to Sarah.
It was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And this will be going out to the world in general, and it will show that dancers think as they do. And you're all absolutely wonderful, and thank you so much.